Hi, I'm Jennifer. I was drenched to the bone, fixing my sister's SUV in a thunderstorm, thinking I was saving her night. 5 days later, I found a $5,900 fine taped to my front door. Someone had reported me for illegal auto work. And that someone was her. When I confronted her, she didn't deny it. She just looked me dead in the eye and said, "You should have known better." That was the moment I realized this wasn't just betrayal. This was war. A war I didn't even know I was already losing. But what she didn't know, I was about to take everything back, quietly. Before we dive in, where are you listening from? What time is it right now? Drop a comment. I read everyone. The storm came on fast that evening, Texas fast. 1 minute I was setting down my keys and kicking off my shoes. The next, the wind was howling like it had a grudge. Rain slammed sideways against the windows, thick and loud, like fists. I'd just finished a long shift at the warehouse and was about to heat up some leftover casserole when I heard the shouting. It was Callista. Her voice cut through the storm like a blade, shrill, panicked. I opened the front door and stepped onto the porch, rain already soaking through my socks. Across the street, Callista was out there, arms flailing beside her car, screaming something I couldn't make out. Headlights flashed. Her engine whined, then cut off completely. She looked lost, like a woman fighting both the weather and whatever trouble she'd gotten herself into. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed the old red toolbox, Dad's toolbox, and a rain jacket. The jacket barely helped. By the time I made it across the street, I was already drenched, water running into my boots and down my back like icy fingers. She barely looked at me. Her eyes were wild. I'm supposed to be at the Hilton. They're waiting on me to give a pitch. I have no idea what happened. It just died. I said nothing, just popped her hood and started looking. Battery terminal, crusted green. I scraped it with my sleeve and frowned. Loose ground wire. Same problem Dad used to grumble about with his truck. Hold the flashlight, I muttered. Callista's hands shook as she held it. But she didn't say thank you, not then, not later. I worked with what I had. One of the clamps in her engine had broken, but I had a spare in Dad's box, salvaged from some junkyard years ago. I tightened the bolt as best I could with numb fingers, heart pounding louder than the thunder overhead. After 20 minutes, the engine coughed, then purred. Callista's eyes lit up. "You did it," she laughed, high and relieved, and slapped me on the back, hard enough to sting. "I owe you big time." "Oh, seriously." For a second, despite the rain trickling down my spine and my shaking hands, I smiled. Maybe, just maybe, this was one of those turning points. The kind of thing she'd remember. I didn't want much. Not credit. Just acknowledgement. A nod. "Oh, you matter." She took off in a spray of wet gravel, tires spinning, and I stood there, watching her taillights disappear down the road. The next 5 days passed in a blur, late shifts, errands, the rhythm of tired feet, and microwave dinners. I didn't mention the storm to anyone. Didn't think I had to. It was just something I did. Like I always did when someone needed help. Until that Friday. I got home around 7:30. The sky was just starting to darken. My neighbor's wind chimes clattered in the breeze. I was juggling grocery bags when I saw it. The bright orange sticker slapped across my front door. A color you can't ignore. Notice of code violation. I blinked. My first thought? Maybe it was for the fence. Or the trash bin I'd left out too long last week. But no. Violation. Operating a commercial auto repair business without a license. Fine. $5,900. The paper trembled in my hands. I read it twice. There were photos attached, grainy black and white shots taken from across the street. One of me, bent over Callista's car. Another of my garage, with the toolbox open. I couldn't breathe right. I felt like I'd been punched. There was no business. Just one night. One car. Her car. I called the city office the next morning. "Yes, ma'am. The photos are time-stamped." We had multiple reports, the woman on the phone said. Repeat offenses are taken seriously. Multiple? I croaked. That's not possible. It was one time. It was my sister's car. During the storm. She didn't respond to that part. Just said I could file an appeal, but the fine stood until further notice. I sat on the edge of my bed for an hour, the letter limp in my lap. I replayed that stormy night. Callista's face. Her hands shaking. That slap on the back. I owe you big time. My chest ached with something I couldn't name. I didn't want to believe what my gut was telling me. So I walked across the street. Her porch was lined with succulents and solar lanterns, always perfect, always curated. She opened the door on the third knock, dressed in yoga pants and a peach-colored sweatshirt, a glass of green juice in one hand. She blinked like she didn't expect me. "Hey," she said flatly. "You okay?" I held up the notice. "Did you tell the city I was running a business out of my garage?" Her lips twitched into something between a smirk and a shrug. "You should have known better." "What?" "You're not serious. You're not licensed. You can't just go around fixing things like Dad used to. You know how strict they are about code stuff here." "I helped you," I said, my voice cracking. "You were late. In a storm." She sipped her juice, calm as ever. "City rules are city rules. I didn't tell them to fine you. They probably just saw." I stared at her, heart thudding. "Callista, you live across the street. Those pictures, who else would have taken them?" She raised a brow. "Don't make this a thing, okay? You're overreacting. No apology. No thank you. No hint of guilt. Just distance." I stepped back, the rain beginning to sprinkle again. It felt colder this time, even though it was lighter. The wind blew past my ears, but all I could hear was the echo of her voice. "You should have known better." I didn't slam her gate shut. I didn't curse or scream. I just turned and walked away, one soggy step after another, the letter crumpled in my fist. The rain didn't soak me like before. Not on the outside, anyway. But inside, something cracked. I didn't slam the door behind me. I didn't cry either. But the silence in my house felt like it was waiting for something to break. I stood in the entryway, wet jacket clinging to my back, and dropped the violation letter on the kitchen table like it was radioactive. The house creaked somewhere. The old AC unit kicked on. But I couldn't move. Not yet. I sat down, the edges of the notice curling under my fingers. My eyes kept landing on that fine, $5,900. But it wasn't the number that burned. It was the realization that I had just become invisible to the very people I'd bled for. That night, I didn't call anyone. Not my brother. Not even my best friend Lisa from church, the one who usually heard everything before I finished processing it. I wanted to believe Callista didn't really mean it. That maybe it was a misunderstanding. A slip. Maybe someone else had taken the photos, and she just didn't correct the record. But that smirk, it kept replaying in my mind like a glitch I couldn't clear. "You should have known better." She didn't even blink when she said it. No pause. No hesitation. Like she'd been waiting to drop it. Like it gave her some sick satisfaction. That phrase dug its heels into my chest. I'd heard versions of it my whole life. But this time, it sounded final. The next morning, I woke up to a headache that felt like I hadn't slept at all. I moved slowly through the motions, brushed my teeth, made coffee, stared at the mug as it steamed. I told myself to act normal, to go on like usual. But by mid-morning, the ache in my stomach turned into something else. The need to talk to someone who remembered I existed outside of my utility. I called Rowan, my older brother. He picked up after 3 rings, voice casual as always. "Hey-o. Everything good?" "I need to talk," I said. "It's about Callista." A pause. Then, what happened? So I told him. Every part, from the storm to the violation notice. My hands shook as I held the phone to my ear. I waited for the indignation. The anger. The "I can't believe she did that to you." What I got instead was a sigh. Look, maybe she was just, I don't know, protecting her reputation. You know how HOA folks are down here. They get twitchy about that kind of stuff, especially with someone taking photos. I blinked. Protecting her reputation? Rowan, she turned me in. That's not twitchy. That's calculated. Maybe. But you've got to see her side too, right? She's got that leadership mixer coming up. Maybe she panicked. I swallowed hard. So I'm supposed to eat a $5,000 fine because my sister didn't want to look unprofessional? I'm not saying it's right, he said. Just try not to make it a thing, okay? Things are already tense. Then, just like that, he shifted the subject to some new grill he was installing. Something about a neighbor's dog barking too much. I stayed on the line another 2 minutes, murmuring responses, before finally saying I had to go. I stared at my phone screen after I hung up. Then it lit up. A new message. From Mom. Callista told me what happened. Don't turn this into drama. You always overreact. That word, always, hit me harder than the fine. It wasn't just this one thing. It never had been. They'd written me into a role I never auditioned for. The emotional loose wire. The one who takes things the wrong way. The one they could depend on. Until I asked for anything back. Then suddenly I was too much. I stepped back, the rain beginning to sprinkle again. It felt colder this time, even though it was lighter. The wind blew past my ears, but all I could hear was the echo of her voice. You should have known better. I didn't slam her gate shut. I didn't curse. I didn't scream. I just turned and walked away, one soggy step after another, the letter crumpled in my fist. The rain didn't soak me like before, not on the outside anyway, but inside, something cracked. I didn't slam the door behind me. I didn't cry either. But the silence in my house felt like it was waiting for something to break. I stood in the entryway, my wet jacket still clinging to my back, and dropped the violation letter on the kitchen table like it was radioactive. The house creaked somewhere. The old AC unit kicked on. But I couldn't move. Not yet. I sat down, the edges of the notice curling under my fingers. My eyes kept landing on that fine, $5,900. But it wasn't the number that burned. It was the realization that I had just become invisible to the very people I'd bled for. That night, I didn't call anyone. Not my brother. Not even my best friend, Lisa from church, who usually heard everything before I could even process it. I wanted to believe Callista didn't really mean it. That maybe it was a misunderstanding. A slip. Maybe someone else took the photos, and she just didn't correct the record. But that smirk, it kept replaying in my mind like a glitch I couldn't clear. You should have known better. She didn't even blink when she said it. No pause. No hesitation. Like she'd been waiting to drop it. Like it gave her some kind of satisfaction. That phrase dug its heels into my chest. I'd heard versions of it my whole life. But this time, it sounded final. The next morning, I woke up with a headache that felt like I hadn't slept at all. I moved slowly through the motions, brushed my teeth, made coffee, stared at the mug as it steamed. I told myself to act normal, to go on like usual. But by mid-morning, the ache in my stomach turned into something else. The need to talk to someone who remembered I existed outside of my utility. I called Rowan, my older brother. He picked up after 3 rings, his voice casual as always. Hey-o. Everything good? I need to talk, I said. It's about Callista. A pause. Then, what happened? So I told him, every part. From the storm to the violation notice. My hands shook as I held the phone to my ear. I waited for the indignation. The anger. The I can't believe she did that to you. What I got instead was a sigh. Look. Maybe she was just, I don't know, protecting her reputation. You know how HOA folks are down here. They get twitchy about that kind of stuff. Especially with someone taking photos. I blinked. Protecting her, Rowan? She turned me in. That's not twitchy. That's calculated. Maybe. But you've got to see her side too, right? She's got that leadership mixer coming up. Maybe she panicked. I swallowed hard. So I'm supposed to eat a $5,000 fine because my sister didn't want to look unprofessional? I'm not saying it's right, he said. Just try not to make it a thing, okay? Things are already tense. Then he shifted the subject to some new grill he was installing. Something about a neighbor's dog barking too much. I stayed on the line another 2 minutes, murmuring back, then said I had to go. I stared at my phone screen after I hung up. Then it lit up. A new message. From Mom. Callista told me what happened. Don't turn this into drama. You always overreact. That word, always, hit me harder than the fine. It wasn't just this one thing. It never had been. They'd written me into a role I never auditioned for. The emotional loose wire. The one who takes things the wrong way. The one they could depend on. Until I asked for anything back. Then suddenly I was too much. I didn't reply. Didn't even type anything. I just turned off the screen and placed the phone face down. That felt like the only form of control I had left. A week passed. I tried to focus on work. Tried to bury the memory of that porch conversation beneath warehouse orders and misdelivered inventory. But every night when I drove home past Callista's house, my knuckles went white on the steering wheel. She waved once. I didn't wave back. Then came Saturday. I'd promised Mom I'd bring over some groceries. She wasn't driving much anymore since her blood pressure meds had changed. So I did what I'd always done. I showed up, bags in hand. No questions asked. She wasn't home when I arrived, out with her church friends. A note on the counter said so. I put the milk and produce in the fridge, left the pantry goods stacked neatly on the kitchen table. On my way out, I passed the hallway shelf and stopped. There was a new photo frame on display. Glossy. Enlarged. Thanksgiving 2022. My heart recognized it instantly. We'd taken that photo after dinner, everyone gathered by the living room window. I remembered being there, just off to the side. I'd come late from work that day, still in my mechanic coveralls, grease under my fingernails. But I smiled. I stood tall. I was in that photo. Or I had been. This version had been cropped carefully. The lighting adjusted. Callista was at the center, perfectly posed. Rowan beside her, holding his daughter. Mom in the middle, beaming like some Hallmark portrait. I wasn't there. Just gone. I stood there a long time. The hum of the refrigerator suddenly loud in the quiet. I didn't touch the frame. Didn't call anyone. I just turned around, walked to the front door, and let myself out. The sun had already started sinking behind the houses, casting gold across the sidewalk. But inside me, there was no warmth left. No sunlight. Just a silence that had moved in and made itself at home. That day, I didn't lose my place in the family. I realized I never had one. The door shut softly behind me, but the noise inside my head didn't stop. I drove home with the radio off. The only sound, the steady rhythm of my turn signal as I waited at intersections. I barely registered it. It started with a photo. But it didn't stop there. A few mornings later, I stepped outside and froze. A plastic sleeve had been taped to my front door. Not from the city this time. This was HOA stationery. I recognized the seal, embossed in faint silver across the top. San Jacinto Grove Homeowners Association. Inside was a short letter, printed on thick paper. Phrases like courtesy reminder and neighborhood standards jumped out. Apparently, performing visible mechanical work in one's driveway was considered a violation of Community Code 3.4.2. I hadn't touched a wrench since the night of the storm. But tucked behind the letter was a single sheet. A printed screenshot. Low resolution, but clear enough. There I was, crouched beside Callista's SUV, soaked to the bone, the glow of the porch light haloing behind me like I'd been caught in the act. The timestamp matched. Same image from the city complaint. No signature. No sender name. Just one line, typed at the bottom. We value neighborhood integrity. I stared at the page until my coffee went cold in my hand. Then something else clicked. The faint banding in the printout. Cheap inkjet striations. I knew that printer. Callista had the same one in her home office. She used to complain about the color cartridges jamming. I slipped the letter into a drawer and stood in the kitchen for a long time. The hum of the fridge filled the silence. A printed image accompanied it. I didn't need to squint to know it was me. I was leaning into my garage, holding a socket wrench in one hand, a small crate of tools on the ground beside me. I wasn't fixing anything. I was reorganizing the shelves. My shelves. The timestamp in the corner read 3:42 p.m. It had been taken from across the street, angled perfectly from the passenger side of a vehicle parked nearby. A dash cam. I stood there for a few seconds, gripping the page between my fingers, tracing the edges with my thumb. Like I could rub the accusation away. Someone was watching me. And they weren't using their eyes. They were recording. The next day, I changed my walking route home from the warehouse. Just a block detour, past the new duplexes, around the old elementary school, then onto my street from the east, avoiding the front of Callista's house. But I saw it anyway. The dark SUV parked just left of her driveway, slightly crooked like it had been abandoned mid-thought. The same dash cam still fixed behind the windshield. Battery pack blinking faint blue. No front license plate. My mouth went dry. The camera was pointed directly at my driveway. I didn't linger. I kept walking like nothing was wrong, heart pounding hard enough I could hear it in my ears. That night, I started writing everything down. In a notebook I kept by the couch. Every errand. Every stop. Who I spoke to. What time I left work. Not because I thought I'd done something wrong, but because I knew, in their version of things, that wouldn't matter. The walls of my home grew smaller with each day. The windows stayed shut. The porch light remained off. I felt myself shrinking. Not just in the neighborhood, but in my own skin. The rain returned on Saturday afternoon. I left work early, after the manager offered to let us cut our shift short. I didn't argue. The gray sky seemed to press down harder with every mile back to my block. As I turned into the alley that ran behind my mother's house, the same one I'd walked for decades, I saw it. A suitcase. Propped upright near the trash bins. Its cheap vinyl covering soaked through, one buckle undone, lid slightly ajar. I slowed down, drawn toward it without knowing why. The moment I lifted the flap, my chest tightened. Inside were things no one should have thrown out. My childhood photo album, its pages warped, colors bleeding into one another. My handwriting on the covers, drawn with glitter pen in 3rd grade. Next to it, a stuffed bear I'd given to my niece Maris. The one Callista always said was too worn to keep around. Its fur was damp, its left ear torn halfway off. And then, a folded envelope. With my handwriting. I recognized the crease pattern instantly. I had written it 5 years ago. A letter to my mother after her surgery. Apologizing for being distant. Offering help. Begging for clarity in the years of silence between us. Still sealed. Never opened. Footsteps clicked on wet concrete behind me. I turned. Callista stood there, with an umbrella and a smile like she'd rehearsed it. "You really should have picked this stuff up months ago," she said. Her tone sweet enough to cut. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. My thoughts scattered in too many directions to form anything coherent. She didn't wait for a reply. She just turned and walked back inside, the umbrella tilting slightly as she stepped up the porch stairs. I stood there until the rain soaked through my jacket. Until I couldn't tell what was water and what was grief anymore. And, for the first time, I didn't want to be part of them anymore. I walked home that day without wiping the rain off my face. It wasn't worth the effort. By the time I reached my porch, every part of me felt waterlogged. My shoes, my coat, my memories. I left the damp photo album and the bear on the counter. I didn't bother trying to dry them. The next few days passed without shape. Mornings bled into afternoons, and I found myself sitting at the kitchen table, long after the cereal in my bowl had gone soggy. I didn't check my phone. I let the texts pile up. I knew Rowan had probably sent a thinking of you message that meant nothing, and if my mother had reached out, it wouldn't have been for me. It'd be to remind me how ungrateful I always made her feel. I wrote an apology anyway, a note I folded into fourths and left on the table. "I'm sorry for being hard to love," I wrote. "I just didn't know I had to earn it." That night, I opened 3 tabs on my laptop. Apartments in Kerrville. Rental U-Haul rates. How to break a lease in Biggar County without losing your entire deposit. I didn't sleep. The next morning, I wandered out to the garage, half out of habit, half to feel like I was doing something besides disappearing. I meant to rearrange the shelf where Dad's tools were still stacked, like old soldiers waiting for orders. But as I reached for a box on the top level, it slipped from my grip and hit the concrete with a hollow, metallic crash. Something clinked. Not the wrench set. It was smaller, finer. I knelt and found it. A faded brown notebook, the edges curled with time. The duct tape holding the spine together had cracked in places. I knew it instantly. My father's repair manual. The last time I'd seen it, he was sitting on the porch, scribbling torque ratios with a pencil worn down to the eraser. I opened it slowly, like it might dissolve in my hands. Inside were pages of sketches, bolts annotated with arrows, messy diagrams of brake systems, scribbled calculations in blue ink. Each page carried a little of his voice, silent now, but familiar in its order. About halfway through, a sticky note had been pressed flat for so long it had become part of the page. "You're not fixing engines," it read. "You're fixing faith." I stopped breathing. My eyes scanned every curve of his handwriting. It wasn't a phrase he ever said aloud. He wasn't a man for philosophy. But maybe he'd saved those thoughts for the pages. Instead of the dinner table, where silence did all the talking, I turned to the back cover. There, taped behind the final page, was an envelope, addressed in his handwriting. To Odlin. I sat down on the cold floor, right there next to the oil stains and the spider web in the corner no one had cleared in months. I opened it. The letter was short. He wrote it the week before he passed. The postmark matched the week I came over after his doctor's appointment. The one where he said he was tired but wouldn't say more. "Odlin," it began. "I know this family makes you feel like the side note you've always been. The one staying late to help, showing up without asking for thanks. And maybe because you never demanded it, no one thought to give it." I blinked hard. He continued. "In this family, you're the only one who listens more than you speak. That's not weakness. It's clarity. I should have told you that more. But you always reminded me of Mom when she was young, before she learned to measure her worth in other people's comfort." I paused there, letting that one line sit in the room with me. Then came the end. "If they ever turn on you, and I hope they don't, but if they do, don't wait for their apology. Don't explain yourself over and over like I did. Just protect your peace. Protect who you are." I sat still for a long time. Then I read it again. And again. Later that night, I lit a candle on the kitchen table. Not because I needed light, but because I needed something warm in the room. I took the apology letter I'd written to my mother earlier and placed it beside the flame. I didn't even hesitate. I tore it straight down the middle. I didn't need to be sorry for being me. I took my father's letter, folded it carefully, and slipped it into my wallet. Not because I needed proof of who I was, but because it reminded me that someone had seen me for exactly that. They didn't have to see me anymore. But I was done erasing myself to stay in their frame. I didn't tell anyone I was done. I just stopped showing up the way they expected me to. No more checking the family group text. No more waiting for invitations that never came. I started giving my time to quieter things like watching the soil warm in the sun or hearing the way paint settles into drywood. The next morning, I stood on my front porch with a cup of coffee and a bucket of daffodil bulbs. The air was still cold enough to sting, but the sun had finally come out. It was just me, the soil, and a silence I wasn't afraid of anymore. I planted flowers in the front yard, not tucked in the back like I was hiding something, but right up front, by the walkway where the HOA clipboard patrol usually strutted through. Yellow blooms loud and bright, defiant in their simplicity. Then I repaired the rusted mailbox hinge, scrubbed the paint off the porch railings, and touched up the trim with a clean white coat. Neighbors glanced over while walking their dogs. One man paused his lawnmower and tilted his head, as if trying to recognize someone he'd already labeled and filed away. I nodded, but I didn't wave. They didn't need my smile anymore, and I didn't need theirs. Later that week, I sat in front of my laptop with a fresh mug of tea and a folder of printed documentation. Every complaint, every time-stamped violation notice, and yes, the egg-stained garage photo. I'd already reached out to a legal aid clinic near downtown. A kind woman named Cheryl called me back and guided me through writing a formal letter. I titled it, Formal Notice of Retaliatory Complaint Abuse. It was calm, clear, no theatrics. I cited the HOA bylaws on selective enforcement, quoted the Fair Housing Act's stance on harassment, and attached a timeline, complete with screenshots, my own receipts, and photographs. I blind copied the city council. Then I hit send. The next few days felt quiet in a new way. Not the defeated kind, but the kind right before something breaks. By the fifth day, an envelope with a blue stamp from the HOA office landed in my mailbox. I read it twice. They were placing all complaints against me on hold pending an internal investigation. I wasn't cleared, but I wasn't invisible anymore. That same night, around 10 p.m., I heard the unmistakable splat of eggs hitting aluminum. I stepped outside in my slippers. 3 yellow streaks dripped down my garage door. One shell had bounced off and rolled to a stop by my garden bed. I didn't clean it. I photographed it under the porch light, printed the photo, then taped it to the garage door with a single note. Try harder. I'm not leaving. The next morning, the note was gone, but not by my hand. I brewed coffee, washed dishes, and moved through the day like nothing had happened. But something had. Something was shifting. I sat down at my desk that afternoon, stared at the blinking cursor in a new email draft, and typed Callista's name in the to field. I didn't write a paragraph. I didn't pour emotion into it. No pleading. No shame. Just this. Effective immediately, all communication must go through legal counsel. If you file another false report or initiate further harassment, I will pursue damages. I paused, considered softening it, but I didn't. I clicked send. That night, I didn't double-check the locks or peek through the curtains like I had the week before. I lit a candle, turned on an old jazz station, and ate dinner by the window. It was the first time in weeks I didn't feel like I was preparing for war, because I wasn't fighting to be liked anymore. I was fighting to be left the hell alone. There's a quiet that settles in your bones after you stop asking to be seen. Not a defeated quiet. A focused one. A silence that sharpens itself. I was loading groceries into my trunk at the HB off Marbach when I saw her. Callista, walking out with 2 bags dangling from her manicured hands. Face turned to the wind like she was in a commercial. She stopped for a beat when she noticed me. Not a word, but her eyes scanned from my face to the manila envelope in my hand. I didn't look away. Not this time. I nodded once. Calm. Controlled. Then I closed my trunk and got into my car. The envelope on my passenger seat held the official letter from the City Compliance Division. My anonymous complaint against the HOA had escalated to a formal audit. They were opening an investigation into patterns of selective enforcement and possible retaliation. I hadn't told a soul, not even Cheryl from Legal Aid. I just let the paper speak, the way they always trusted paper more than people anyway. By the end of the week, the air in the neighborhood had changed, like summer thunder you can't quite see yet, but feel pressing against your skin. I was pruning dead stems in the flower bed when Mr. Epstein from 2 doors down slowed his stride. He adjusted his sunglasses and said, "Hey, you didn't hear this from me, but someone's been leaking things to the board. Internal stuff. Emails. I set my shears down. What kind of emails? He glanced around. Ones Callista wrote. Complaints she claimed came from us, but she was the one writing them. Changing the sender name before submitting to the HOA portal. I didn't flinch. Figures, I said quietly. Thanks for telling me. He looked like he wanted to say more. Maybe even apologize. For being one of the nodders. And avoiders. But I didn't need an apology. I just needed distance. That evening, I sat on the back porch with my journal, listening to the cicadas hum against the early dusk. For the first time in months, my chest didn't feel like it was wrapped in wire. I breathed. And it didn't catch halfway up. And then Rowan called. I almost didn't answer. But I did. Hey, he said, voice low. Hi. I saw the emails. Some neighbors forwarded them to the group chat. Mom's trying to act like she didn't know. She probably didn't, I said flatly. A beat of silence. I'm sorry I didn't take it seriously before, he said. I didn't know it was this deep. I looked at the lines in my palm, at the calluses from weeks of gripping garden tools. You didn't want to pick sides, I said. Yeah, he whispered. I didn't. I took a breath. But you did. He didn't reply. Just exhaled. I heard the shame in that silence. Maybe too late. Maybe not. But I wasn't here for redemption arcs anymore. The following Tuesday, the HOA board called an emergency meeting at the community center. No agenda posted. Just attendance required. I arrived 5 minutes early. Wore a plain black blazer. Jeans. Hair in a low bun. No lipstick. No earrings. Just clarity. The room buzzed, whispers over plastic chairs, the smell of cheap carpet cleaner and bad coffee. I found a seat in the third row from the back, near the emergency exit. Callista stood up front, pretending to organize folders. Her smile looked stretched. Someone tapped her shoulder and handed her a printed packet. I didn't need to see it to know what was in it. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. I watched. Waited. Because they didn't know it yet. But that night I wasn't just a woman in the room. I was the knife on the table. By the time the HOA president cleared his throat and called the meeting to order, the room had gone pin-drop silent. Not because anyone respected the man, but because everyone sensed something was coming. I sat quietly, legs crossed at the ankle, palms resting on my thighs. The Navy chairs squeaked when people shifted. The air buzzed with forced stillness, like a room waiting for thunder. Callista stood. Her blouse was white, crisp. Sleeves pushed up like she was about to do something important. She wore that fake casual smile she always used when she thought she was in control. I just want to say, she began. There's been a lot of confusion stirred up lately. Emotions are high, and it's understandable. But the HOA has always stood for unity and structure. That's what keeps this neighborhood safe and beautiful. She scanned the room, making eye contact with board members, then let her gaze float over the crowd, skimming past me like I wasn't there. As for the complaints, she continued, I think we all know some of them are based on personal grievances. Things taken out of context. I mean, a few unverified screenshots? It's absurd. That was her word. Absurd. The HOA treasurer, a woman in her 70s, with stiff hair and eyes that had seen too many budgets and not enough truth, raised a brow. Callista, she said coolly, do you deny submitting enforcement letters under other residents' names? A flush crept up Callista's neck. Excuse me, it's a simple question. I've followed protocol, Callista replied. Anything else is a misinterpretation. That was my cue. I stood slowly. No dramatic flair. No deep breath. Just rose. Like gravity had finally loosened its grip on my spine. I'd like to submit something for the board's review, I said. A few heads turned. Some widened their eyes like they were remembering I existed. I walked up, heels tapping lightly, and handed a flash drive to the HOA secretary. There's screen-recorded video inside, I explained. Footage from a whistleblower with admin access to the HOA portal. It shows email drafts, timestamped, written on Callista's account. Several letters submitted under alternate names, including one with a subject line that reads, I paused. Just enough. This will shut her up. A low gasp moved through the room like a shiver through wheat. The secretary plugged the drive into her laptop. The screen flickered to life, timestamps, file names, email drafts in a familiar font. A recorded screen showing Callista's cursor hovering over attachments. Pictures of my driveway. Notes scribbled in the margins like we weren't real people. Then came the line. She typed it herself. This will shut her up. The projector flicked off. No one moved. No one said a word. Then from the second row, someone read aloud the subject line again. Soft, but clear. You should have known better. I didn't blink. I didn't flinch. I just looked at Callista and said, You said that to me once. I figured I'd return the sentiment. Her mouth opened slightly, like maybe she wanted to say it was a joke, or that she hadn't meant it like that. But her throat betrayed her. No sound came out. The board president leaned forward. Effective immediately, Callista Marin is suspended from board duties pending full audit. All past complaint activity will be reopened for review. A man in the back clapped once. Another followed. And then, like slow rain on a metal rooftop, it grew, one after another. Polite, firm, not for me, but for truth, finally spoken out loud. Callista gathered her purse with rigid fingers, cheeks burning crimson. No one rose to go with her. No one reached out, not even the ones who used to echo her like a choir. She walked out. I didn't watch the door close, because the truth was, she lost the room. But what she didn't know was that she'd already lost the war before she walked in. The first sign that something had shifted didn't come with a phone call or a knock. It came in cardboard. A full week had passed since the HOA meeting. The air had cooled a little, like the neighborhood itself had exhaled. I'd been sweeping off my porch that morning, routine returning to my bones, when I saw the box, just sitting there beside the welcome mat. No delivery truck. No knock. No note. Just there. I stared at it a long while before bringing it inside. The weight was light, but something about it made my hands feel heavy. I set it down on the kitchen table and peeled back the flaps slowly, like it might explode if I moved too fast. Inside, at the top, was a folded sheet of notebook paper, the one I had written to my mother months ago. The envelope had been torn open, but the crease in the middle showed it hadn't been handled gently. Beneath it was my old photo album, the one I thought had been ruined, now dried out, rebound, corners crisp again. And resting atop the last layer of items was a yellow post-it. The handwriting was unmistakable. I didn't mean for it to go that far. I just didn't want to be second anymore. No apology. No name. No real ownership. Just her version of peace. I took a breath and placed everything back into the box. Then I walked it over to the bookshelf in the living room. Not to hide it, but to remember. Not the pain, but the boundary it now represented. There would be no more stepping over it. From anyone. 3 days later, the city audit wrapped up. The results came in quiet, but final. Callista was officially removed from the HOA board. All her filed complaints were invalidated. The violations were cleared from my property record without appeal. She resigned from her nonprofit the same week to refocus on family. The local paper quoted, "No one called to tell me, but that Friday, an envelope from the HOA arrived. Simple, typed, sealed, no unnecessary words. We acknowledge past missteps in complaint handling. Thank you for your patience and commitment to the neighborhood." It didn't fix everything, but it didn't need to. Sometimes, acknowledgement is enough. The following weekend, I visited my father's grave. Not alone this time. Callista's daughter, Savannah, now 18, had asked to come along. She wore a quiet expression, the kind that carried more questions than she was ready to ask. We stood in front of the small headstone, while wind stirred the edge of her hoodie. "Is it true," she asked finally, "that you're the one who fixed Grandma's roof when it collapsed?" "Not Mom." I looked down at the soil. "Yes," she nodded once. "I thought so. Mom used to take credit for everything." I gave her a gentle smile. Not out of pity, but relief. "I don't need credit," I said. "But I won't let the truth stay buried again." From the inside pocket of my coat, I pulled out the small suture wrench that had once belonged to Dad. The one he let me hold when I was 8, telling me it was for hands that fix what matters. I placed it on the corner of the stone and whispered, "Thank you, Daddy." We stood a little longer, then walked back to the car. No drama, no grand goodbye, just closure. That evening, I returned home and turned on my porch light. Not because I was afraid anymore, but because I was present and ready. The porch was freshly painted now, a soft gray blue. Flowers bloomed in the beds out front, and the mailbox no longer leaned to one side. Everything was quiet, still, whole. Then something I hadn't expected. A soft knock. My neighbor from 2 doors down, Clara, stood there with a small bag of lemon cookies. "I was baking," she said. "Figured I'd bring some by. It's good to see you out here again." A few more neighbors joined that week. Some with coffee, others just with conversation. No one brought up what had happened. They didn't need to. It was over. And I had stayed. Later that night, as the stars stretched across the sky, I opened my father's old repair notebook once again. The pages still smelled faintly of oil and cedar. On the last page, the words I had once overlooked now felt like they'd been written for this exact moment. "You're not fixing engines. You're fixing faith. This time." I smiled. Because this time, it stuck. Sometimes the ones who drag your name through the mud forget. Mud washes off. But character doesn't.